So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our virtual community vaping town hall. My name is Mike Wade, and I'm with New River Valley Community Services. NRVCS is conducting this event in partnership with the Vaping Task Force of the Montgomery County Prevention Partners. Today, if you weren't already aware, is the National Takedown Tobacco Day of Action. We're gathered here today because youth vaping touches nearly every corner of our community: parents, schools, healthcare providers, and most importantly, young people themselves. Welcome to our virtual community vaping town. Our goal is simple: share clear facts, hear and recognize lived experiences, learn about support and solutions, and walk out with one action hopefully each of us can take. This is a no judgment space. And with that, now I'll turn it over to my NRVCS colleague and co-chair of the Montgomery County Prevention Partners, Mr. Ross Wilsey.
Well, thank you, Mike. As Mike said, my name is Ross Wilsey, and I work with New River Valley Community Services as well, with the Community Wellness and Outreach team. And Mike summed up this event really well, so I won't get too much into that. But we are excited to have I'll say distinguished panel of folks here today to help us learn more about um, nicotine addiction and vaping in our young people. So, just to give you a brief idea of what today's event's going to look like, we'll start by giving each of our five panelists about 5 minutes each to present on a specific area of focus related to vaping. And then I'll introduce each of them in turn. After they've had a chance to present, we'll spend about 20 minutes asking questions directed toward the entire panel. And then at the end, we'll leave about 10 minutes for anyone on the YouTube live stream to ask questions of the panel. So if that is something you're interested in doing, the way to submit a question is to just leave a comment here on the YouTube live stream, and then we'll get to that towards the end of the live stream today. It will last at the most 1 hour, so that's what we're planning. If there are no questions from anyone on the panel or anything like that, I'm just going to move on now to introducing our first panelist, Dr. Carrie Redigan. Carrie is a recently retired professor of public health and director of the undergraduate public health program at Virginia Tech after spending 44 years there, helping make the public health program what it is today. In 2022, he received the Excellence in Teaching Award from the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning at Virginia Tech. Carrie has also encouraged and fostered student involvement in some of our coalition initiatives. And to say we're, honored to have him as a very active member of MCPP would be an understatement. So, Carrie, I will go ahead and turn it over to you, and I'll start sharing your slideshow here in just 1 second.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ross. Appreciate that introduction. And welcome, everyone. And we're going to go right into the slide presentation. There we go. Almost. Okay. Okay. I thought a good starting point to talk about vaping and that is just kind of give a little bit of historical perspectives. And I've just pulled out just a couple of key years here. One being 1964, when the Surgeon General's report highlighting the health effects of smoking came out. And it was no surprise really when it came out, because people for years had known that smoking is not good for you, but it was really so ingrained in our culture, and people freely smoked back then. There was smoking sections in restaurants. There were smoking sections in some theaters. Even some of the high schools had smoking sections for students if the smoking age was 18 or whatever. So we just saw it really across all aspects of society in that. And to underscore that, in 1965, 42% of the adult population in the U.S. smoked cigarettes. So a significant number there. And over time then, for a number of different reasons, the percentage goes down. So currently under 11% of the adult population in the United States smokes cigarettes. We'll talk about vaping in youth here in a few minutes. So if we look at that, what are the real reasons, or what are the contributing factors to that decrease in smoking? Education certainly is a factor there, where students would have health education, high schools, community-based education through agencies and so forth. Warning labels that were put on cigarettes, talking about the health effects of cigarettes, maybe a little bit there, but probably more so than those two, which are important, would be the policies and regulations and so forth that were related to cigarette smoking. Right now, cigarettes are what, $6, $8 a pack. You can't smoke everywhere, right? You've got to be in certain locations to smoke, and there's, no more smoking in restaurants or on airplanes and all these other kinds of things. So a lot of that has made it very, very difficult for people to smoke cigarettes. And I think that's probably a major factor in the decreased price and the difficulty in terms of that. If you go to Europe, if you go to, like let's say Paris or whatever, where it's wide open in terms of smoking, you'll go into a restaurant, sit next to people smoking and so forth. A whole lot different. But I would say a lot of contributing factors with policy being right there at the forefront. Next slide, Ross. Okay, as far as vaping and public health, if we just go back and look at public health in general, we define public health as protecting, promoting, and improving population health, the individual, the family, and the community. So that's our focus. It's a big umbrella. And the infrastructure for public health is federal, state, and local, okay, and broadly defined. So we've got a federal level, we got a state level, and we got local, and we have tax-funded agencies, private organizations, foundations, and so forth. So public health is a big umbrella. It's not just the New River Health District or the State Health Department. It's a big umbrella that all of us speaking today and listening to this are a part of. Next slide, Ross. Okay, if we look at the percentage of adults who use cigarettes by age group in the United States from 2019 to 2023, we can see that in the 18 to 20-year-olds, it would be, basically in 2019, about 8%, about 10% by 2020, and it was going up now, but more recently, it has decreased significantly there to a point where we're talking about literally under 1% in that in terms of age group, and a lot of that has been shifted over to vaping as opposed to actual cigarette smoking in that. So if we go to the next slide, okay, we can look at e-cigarettes in Virginia youth, and this is data from the Virginia Healthy Youth Foundation, where we talk about youth vaping has decreased over the past couple of years. More than 8% of high schoolers and more than 4% of middle schoolers in Virginia still use e-cigarettes with emergency room issues and so forth that are associated with that. So we know that a lot of this has shifted from tobacco to vaping in general in terms of e-cigarettes and that. Next slide. Okay, health hazards that are the health hazards with respect to the e-cigarettes. Addiction, of course, is one of those, and you've got risks that are associated with that and so forth, as exemplified there by that graphic. But the second one there, the reasons for vaping among U.S. adolescents, if we look at three things: to relax or relieve tension, about 48% of those that vaped in the past 12 months. These are all grades combined in that. 58% in the past 30 days, and near daily, about 71%, just to relax. That would be the major reason. You asked people years ago why they smoke, number one response would be to be relaxed, okay? And then other percentages you can see there to experiment, to see what it's like, 49% of those who vaped in the past 12 months and so forth. So there are reasons that people vape, all right, that were very similar to the reasons that they smoked cigarettes years ago, okay? Next slide, please, Ross. Okay, and selected public health activities related to all that include surveillance, which is data like we were just talking about. What we try to do most often is to try to really make our decisions and programs and interventions so forth data driven, all right? Not just opinions and so forth, but actual hard data that we do wind up getting, and it will in fact reinforce what it is that we're doing. We also try to determine the determinants of the behavior, what is related to that particular behavior. And we talk there, relaxing and so forth, whatever that may be, peer pressure, whatever determinants of behavior we have to deal with as well. We develop interventions to reduce the problem. All right. We develop that in public health, and we do that based on a number of different models and so forth. We do evaluation. Does that intervention work? Does it in fact decrease vaping rates and so forth? All right. And then we need to inform our decision makers with respect to legislators and that, so that they're aware of what this data means and the kinds of things that they can do in terms of statutes and so forth. Next slide, Russ. Okay, and then we can have, with all of this, surveillance data, programs, and services, and there's a lot of issues here. One is Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and I'm sure a lot of you are very, very familiar with the YRBS and doing that every other year, and what we can begin to see trends in this data and so forth. And the YRBS is done at a local level, it's done at a state level, a national level. CDC has made a major investment in this over the years. We also have community health needs assessments that oftentimes the hospitals do and the universities do with respect to certain areas in that. And we get more information about vaping there, more data there. There's also nationally county health rankings that we can log on to, pull up Montgomery County, Roanoke County, Giles County, whatever it may be, and it will in fact go through a rich sources of data regarding the health issues in the counties and that. Higher education, we have a Center for Public Health Practice and Research at Virginia Tech that in fact is involved in this as well in terms of data and reporting and development of programs and that. Community services boards such as New River Valley Community Services, again, are a part of that. Virginia Healthy Youth Foundation is a part of that. Healthcare organizations, Carilli and Lewis Gale and so forth. Other resources like the one right here, Montgomery County Prevention Partners and so forth. So there's a lot of people who are involved and a lot of rich sources of information and data and so forth to be able to really have a good grounding and foundation for the kinds of things that we do. All right, and just the last few slides here to show you what some of these things might look like. If we look at the campaign for tobacco-free kids, there's a website for that, and it's got lots of information, lots of data there in terms of surveillance data on the behavior itself, plus some of the interventions in that and how successful they would be, evidence-based in that. Next slide. Okay, the next one, or is it? Did you miss one? There we go. Yeah. There's e-cigarette regulations in Virginia in terms of the Public Health Law Center. You can wind up looking at that and seeing what the regulations are. And to that end, we know that there's a regulation that any tobacco selling organization has to be more than 1,000 feet from a school. All right. And we had some students in the undergraduate program, the BSPH program, actually look at Christiansburg and Blacksburg and measure those distances to see if they were in compliance with the regulations. And they had a very, very interesting presentation on that. Next slide, Ross. And then there's a legislative information system where you can actually keep track of bills that are going through the state and what the status of them is, what they state, what all the issues are that are associated with them. You can track that through the system as well. And then the last one I just threw in there is the next slide. Yeah, is the county health rankings, which I think you'll find to be very, very valuable, not just for tobacco use and smoking and vaping and that, but just in general, the kinds of issues that they identify in the counties and how they relate to the state and how they relate to the national level. It's a rich source of data. And there are many, many others. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So again, in summary, protecting, promoting, improving the health of populations, and that involves data, involves intervention, involves evaluation, and it involves a collaborative effort literally among all of us. So I'll go ahead and end on that note, and we can maybe have some questions a little bit later. Okay.
Thank you so much, Carrie. That was very detailed and a lot to think about. So our next panelist was originally planned to be Dr. Pam Ray, who is the Southwest Virginia Deputy Regional Epidemiologist for the Virginia Department of Health. Unfortunately, she's unable to join us today, so we're thankful, though, to have Mike Wade step in for her. I'm sure he needs no introduction, but Mike is the coordinator of the Community Wellness and Outreach team here at NRVCS, where he has worked for going on 22 years. Mike is a passionate advocate for the health of our communities and works tirelessly, I can attest to that, to ensure that anyone struggling with substance use or mental health issues knows that there is always hope. Mike was recently nominated for the 2025 Business Person of the Year by the Radford Chamber of Commerce. And in addition to his work in prevention, Mike is quite the talented artist. Mike, we appreciate you stepping in for Pam at the last minute.
Well, thank you, Ross, for that kind introduction. Glad to be here and so appreciative of all of our panelists today. I'll do my best to capture some of what I anticipate Dr. Ray probably would have shared, but we certainly miss her and wish she were here with us today. But let's move on. So, grape, cherry, cotton candy, root beer float, sour apple, mango ice blast. So how much do you think sweet flavors like these matter to our young people? Well, a lot. In fact, more than 80% of youth who have ever tried tobacco report starting with a flavored tobacco product. And according to the FDA, nearly all youth who started using e-cigarettes did so with a flavored product. Now, federal law prohibits the manufacture and sale of flavored cigarettes, with the exception of menthol. However, flavors are still permitted in all other commercial tobacco products like cigars, chew and snuff, and e-cigarettes and vapes. Once you realize that most tobacco users start before they turn 18, it's easy to understand why the tobacco industry works so hard to keep flavored cigars, e-cigarettes, and smokeless tobacco products on store shelves. When flavored cigarettes were banned in the US back in 2009, flavored tobacco products quickly took on new shapes and styles, and after a federal flavored e-cig restriction limited sweet candy flavors in certain kinds of e-cigarettes, this was back in 2020, the popularity of alternatives like flavored disposable vapes and sweet e-cigarette juices used in refillable devices soared. Meanwhile, as I mentioned already, the use of menthol, a minty flavor that research has shown makes tobacco products easier to start and harder to quit, has not been restricted by the FDA to date. So that means there are still plenty of ways that our children, adolescents, and teenagers can be tempted by all sorts of flavors, bright colors and packaging, really cool devices and products, all intentionally designed to turn our young people into long-term, if not lifelong, customers by feeding into a potential addiction to nicotine. With that in mind, we'll now watch a short video produced by the Idaho Department of Health that really speaks to how prevalent vaping is among our young people. Ross?
In my opinion, there's not a specific type of kid that vapes. I think it spans from rich, poor, to athlete, to honor roll.
We are seeing children as young as 7 or 8 years old that are vaping.
If you don't think your kid is vaping, think again. 40% of all kids in Idaho have at least tried it once.
Kids are able to hide them much easier than a traditional cigarette, right? They smell different. They're a lot smaller. They're a lot easier to conceal.
Some of the ways I've hidden vapes at school are making secret pockets in my backpack.
Keep it in my pocket and put my phone over it so that it just looks like I have my phone.
In the toilet paper dispenser.
In my bra.
In my sleeves, or my socks, or in my belt line, so if they search me with the metal detector, it beeps over my belt.
Kids are vaping everywhere. They are vaping in school, they're vaping at home, they are vaping in front of adults. You know, vapes are designed to look like office products. They look like Sharpies, they look like pens, they look like flash drives.
The thing with the pod devices and disposables is they're like super easy to hide. There's drawstrings, watches, pens, keychains, lipstick.
And because of the way they're designed, they can literally be used anywhere without being detected.
Some places I would hide it in my skateboard, just put it right there. Blanket, I'd stuff it in here. Inside my guitar, put it under my mattress or under my carpet, under this one, or under the flat sheet. But I'd usually keep it under my pillow mostly because that's the easiest place I can go. When I wake up, I usually take a hit. Middle of the night, I usually take a hit as well.
The best way to keep your kids away from vaping is to talk to them. So we actually do have studies that show us that talking to your kids works. Kids who regularly have to check in with their parents about their free time are half as likely to try tobacco products. Those are great numbers. So I actually often get asked by parents, how do I talk to my kids? You remain calm, you don't be alarmed about it, and you look for opportunities to talk with them. Ask a simple question like, I hear that a lot of kids are vaping at school. Is that something that you're seeing? And that kind of opens up the lines of communication. And if you're not confrontational with them, and if they're not feeling like this is a lecture, then they're open to telling you what their day-to-day life is like, and you can kind of see what they're faced with.
Ross, I think I'll turn it back over to you at this point.
All right. Apologies for the low volume there. I'm not sure what was going on with that, but yeah, we just thought that was a really good video, especially just encouraging people to talk with their kids. I think that's an important thing. So thank you, Mike. I appreciate what you've brought to the table. Next, I'd like to introduce Erica Slagle Perry. She's Education and Training Coordinator for the New River Valley Regional Commission. Erica works with the Commission's community health team supporting the recovery ecosystem, and she has over 20 years of experience in both public health and medical health. Erica is also a board member with Tales of Recovery and a volunteer with the Medical Reserve Corps with the New River Health District. Erica has been a wonderful recent addition to MCPP and is always eager to get involved in whatever way she can to benefit prevention and recovery education. So Erica, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Ross. We'll wait on the slideshow. All right, so thank you guys. We are going to be taking a little bit of a deeper dive into youth vaping. I'm going to set my timer here. Sorry about that. And we're going to go. All right, you can go ahead to the next slide. So vaping is widely recognized as a severe public health and safety issue all across Virginia. Schools report high numbers of usage among middle, high schoolers, and even elementary students. Slide. This is a brief history of youth vaping nationally. So in the 2010s, vaping first started to gain traction. 2011 to 2018, the number of youth vapors went from around 220,000 to over 3 million. And in 2016, the Surgeon General put out a report on e-cigarettes. In 2018, youth vaping was classified as an epidemic. By 2019, the use among high school students was 1 in 3. And in 2024, more than 1.6 million of our youth were vaping. Next slide. Vape and tobacco shops are prolific here in the New River Valley. The stores are often brightly lit with LED display signs. The lights help to create a sort of vibe that lends to more of like a trendy, modern, it shoots for young crowds. And here are photos of 3 of our local shops. The one on the left is near Starbucks on South Main in Blacksburg. The second is on the inside of a shop on North Franklin Street between Food Lion and Christiansburg Recreation Center. And the third is in the Food Lion Plaza on Price's Fork in Blacksburg, right next to Kipps Elementary School. Slide. So what is in a vape? Now I will preface this with that it's going to vary vape to vape. There are differences even between pods from the same pack and what can be in these vapes. However, there are a few substances that are common. Of course, nicotine. Nicotine does affect brain development. And that's something that some people don't think about, but the brain is definitely affected. Propylene, glycol, there are carcinogens. There's, let's see, diacectyl, and that's linked to lung disease, or what's been known as popcorn lung. Let's see, there's diethylene glycol, and that's a chemical that's actually used in antifreeze. There's, of course, heavy nickels, so like our heavy metals. So you think like nickel, tin, lead. There's benzene, which is it's a volatile organic compound that's found in car exhaust. And then there's other ultrafine products as well. Next slide. So when you're comparing the combustible tobacco, or otherwise like a regular cigarette, to a vape, you can see how concentrated these vapes really are. So like one Juul pod is almost 2 packs of cigarettes. One Vuse pod is more than 4 packs of cigarettes. And an Elf bar, which is widely popular among our youth, contains almost 30 packs of cigarettes worth of nicotine. Now, depending on how heavy of a vapor, our youth, the person is, the pods in Elf bar could last anywhere from 1 day to a week or 2. And that's a lot of nicotine. Next slide, please. I will preface this slide by saying that we don't have a lot of local data on youth tobacco use or youth in general. Also, any national data that we get for the year 2025 may not be accurate. The CDC Office on Smoking and Health was effectively eliminated, and that did stop national efforts to track youth tobacco use and promote smoking cessation. So for high school students that vape, nationally, we're at 7.8%. Virginia is at 8.1%. And of those youth that do use electronic cigarettes, nationally, 26.3% report using it daily. And in Virginia, we're a little lower at 25%. Now, annually, Big Tobacco spends $8.6 billion nationally, while $310 million of that is spent in Virginia alone. Next slide, please. We're looking at a generation of manipulated youth. And Mike and Dr. Redican spoke about this earlier, the names of these vapes. We're looking at vapes that, creme brulee, chocolate, banana, these names, it masks the natural bitterness of nicotine, and it makes the whole vaping experience feel more fun and less risky. And again, most youth who did start smoking started with the flavored products. And so let's look at a common, will you go back for me? Thank you, sir. We're looking that, a lot of youth think that vapes are safer. Vapes are not addicting. They're just harmless water vapor. All of my friends vape. Those are all common myths that just are not accurate among our youth. Tobacco and vape companies, they do other things to target our youth. They do sports sponsorships, price incentives, making it less expensive so that our youth can afford them. They exploit regulatory loopholes, again, super high nicotine content. And then the appealing and concealable product design, which we'll talk about next. So you can go ahead, please. All right, so in plain sight here. Vaping is easy to hide, right? That's a part of the problem. If we're looking here, we have all of the, the fruity smells that pass for like lotion, candles, gum. And then you have some vapes themselves that look like highlighters, pens, cups, purses, or even stuffed animals. And I'll let you look here and you tell me what you think as to if our youth are being targeted or not. I do want to point out here, there are also smart vapes now, which is like a game, and you have to actually puff the vape to advance to the next level. Okay, next slide, please. Social media and media influencers. These impact youth by normalizing, promoting its use on platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and teens who see the vaping or cannabis content on social media are far more likely to start vaping, and that's according to Yale. Next. All right, prevention. Currently here in the New River Valley, there are a few prevention programs that take place in public schools. We have during health and PE class, students receive education on vaping and tobacco. We have outside programs like Just Say No, KNOW, and Addicted to Life. Botvan life skills are implemented locally, and some use other online programming, such as programs from institutions like Stanford. And statewide, the Virginia Foundation for Healthy Youth, Department of Health, Virginia Department of Education, Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, and the Virginia Office of Behavioral Health and Wellness offer various PSAs and online education. However, unfortunately, Virginia's grade for youth vaping and tobacco prevention is overall an F. All right, you can go to the next slide. And that's it. Thank you guys so much. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them at the end of the session.
Well, thank you so much, Erica. Appreciate that. All right. I'd now like to introduce Marty Graham. Marty is a former District E representative on the Montgomery County School Board, serving from 2015 until her term expired in 2023. A retired IT professional and Radford University graduate, she served as vice chair of the school board in 2023. And Marty, also a mother and grandmother, continues to remain active in the community, including her work with MCPP. She's incredibly passionate about this particular topic and helped launch MCPP's Vaping Task Force in 2024. Marty, I will turn it over to you, and I'll pull the slideshow up right as soon as I can.
I don't think I have a slideshow, Ross.
You sure don't. I was just like in the
That's
mode.
fine. I'm just going to talk.
All right, go for it.
Thank you, Ross, for that kind introduction. And welcome everyone to this very important panel. The previous panelists have given you so much information about vaping, and especially here in Montgomery County, the New River Valley. I want to first highlight the legislation that requires tobacco retailers to be within greater than 1,000 linear feet of any school or childcare. And to put that in perspective, about the majority of our schools in Montgomery County have tobacco retailers within walking distance of the schools, which, you know, which comes to all the advertising that our previous panelists have talked about, and really, you know, makes it very prevalent for them to see that every day on their way to school or on their way home. The other thing I want to talk about is the you know, working with the state to increase the distance. While locally we could accept the same legislation, it can't be higher than what the state level has. So we really need to work on that. Then the other thing I wanted to talk about, which my previous panelists already talked about, is the work that we started in 2024 at MCPS, along with a pilot school area in Montgomery County. We worked with the principals and developed a prevention and education intervention that would provide students found vaping with an alternative to punitive discipline. This process uses the curriculum developed by Stanford University to educate and help students understand the effects of vaping on their bodies. NRVCS is, we work with them to administer this curriculum and provide mental health support, as well as other educational resources like palm cards, videos that explain what vaping is doing to their bodies, to the students in our secondary, in the secondary schools at MCPS. And that is still in effect, and we are thankful for all the partnerships with NRVCS that make that possible. That's all I have. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Marty. All right, and last but not least, I'd like to introduce John Dance. So in addition to being MCPP co-chair alongside yours truly, John is a dedicated advocate for recovery, mental wellness, and community resilience. He earned a Master of Public Health degree in 2024 and is currently pursuing a PhD in the Foundations of Education at Virginia Tech, in which he's exploring the intersection of mental wellness, education, and recovery support systems. As a person in long-term recovery, John has been instrumental in advancing the community resilience model, or CREM, and other evidence-based approaches to mental wellness. As many of you know, John recently opened the doors to the RE-Center, a space not for fixing people, but for fostering support, relationship, empathy, and care. Anywhere he goes, John brings lived experience, deep care, and a commitment to meeting people where they are. So John, we are excited to hear from you. And I did say last but not least, thank you for the reminder. We do have one more panelist after this. So John, we're excited to hear from you. And apparently he is bringing the heat. So we look forward to that.
Thanks, Ross, for the introduction. I appreciate it. And I want to echo what's already been said and how much I appreciate, that we're having this conversation. It's been a lot of knowledge shared in the space, but more importantly, the shared commitment that we all have and the actual understanding of what young people are experiencing, and we're not just reacting to it, and that matters, especially to me, and I know to everyone on the panel. So, all right, let's talk about addiction. So, what I want to do is just build a little bit off of, especially from a lens of addiction, mental health, and what it actually looks like in real life. And so we're going to start here with nicotine and youth mental health and what's really happening. So when we talk about vaping, especially with young folks, we tend to talk about it like it's just a bad habit or a trend. But that's not what it is. It's actually addiction. Erica mentioned that vapes aren't addicting, but I'm here as the residential addiction and recovery subject matter expert. I can definitely say everything is addicting, and everyone is an addict or something, or have faced an addiction of their own, or have struggled with something unknowingly or knowingly that is actually addiction. I always say we all have cell phones, and people would lose their minds if we told them they were to get their cell phones taken away for the rest of their lives. So again, I'm not trying to be dramatic, in a worst case scenario way, but in a very real, very biological, very fast moving way that's impacting how young people feel, think, and cope with just everyday life every single day. So we've talked about this statistic a couple times. You heard it from multiple of the panel members and seen it on multiple slides. 1.6 million young people are currently vaping in the United States. Now let's just slow that down for a second, because it's not just a number. That's classrooms, that's sports teams, that's kids sitting at home just trying to manage stress, their anxiety, peer pressure, and reaching for a vape is something that makes them feel relief, gives them that, calm that they're looking for when maybe their mind's racing, or, in the case of neurodivergency, like myself, it was a form of self-medication. And here's the part that we don't always see clearly, is that nicotine works. It's a drug, but it only works at first. It hits the brain fast, it releases dopamine, which we're craving. It creates a sense of calm, a sense of focus, even control at times. So for young folks dealing with stress and anxiety, it can feel like a solution. But what's actually happening underneath that is something very different. Over time, nicotine rewires our brains. It rewires our brain's stress and also our brain's reward systems. So instead of helping with anxiety, it actually increases it. Instead of helping you focus, it actually makes it harder to regulate without it. And that's where the shift happens from using it to needing it, from being peer pressured into, using it as the cool person to then when you don't use it, you feel bad and you have to then use it again to feel better. So in the work that I do, and we'll switch kind of to the mental health connection, in recovery and community spaces with students in schools, I see this pattern all the time. Young people aren't vaping because they don't care. They're vaping because they're trying to cope. There's their anxiety, their stress, they're overwhelmed, their pressure to perform, parents' expectations, so society's expectations, their peers' expectations, and then nicotine becomes a tool for them. Because we haven't taught coping skills or tools to kids. We're left to our own devices in a way to learn how to deal with our emotions and regulate our nervous system and things like that. But nicotine becomes a short-term instant gratification tool that creates long-term instability. So what starts as this helps me calm down turns into I can't calm down without it. I can't sleep without it. I mean, you saw a little bit in the video where, he had it under his bed. He would take it in the middle of the night as soon as he woke up. And that becomes a cycle, becomes a habit, becomes an addiction. As we also know, this doesn't exist in isolation. Vaping changes how people think about substances in general. I'm in true belief that, back when I was coming up, marijuana was the gateway drug. Whichever drug you get to first is a gateway drug. And that would usually be cigarettes or vaping now is the case. But for me, it was cigarettes. And so, like I said, vaping changes how young people think about the substances in general. So it lowers the barrier and normalizes this behavior. It builds familiarity, with using something external to regulate, and something that's giving them instant gratification instead of working on what, coping skills they could use that just might take a little time, but in the end, practicing over and over can be an instant gratification. So again, it's not that every young person who vapes is going to move on to something else, but it does increase that risk. And it starts earlier than a lot of us realize. Like I've heard now even with drinking, it's starting in the single digits, not in the double digits anymore. So lower than 10 years old. And I can imagine that cigarettes come before that. And so I can say this personally as someone in recovery that I didn't start with the intention of developing a substance use disorder. I didn't start with something that helped me feel different, or I did start with something that helped me feel different. I started with something that helped me cope. I started with something that helped me manage what I didn't understand yet. And over time, that relationship changed. And as I saw pieces of that same pattern just showing up earlier and often through smoking cigarettes for me, and now with young kids, it's vaping. So next slide, Ross. Let's shift a little to the hope and what helps. And here's what part is where I really want to emphasize is that it's not about blaming young people. It's not about punishment, because punishment doesn't teach regulation, it doesn't build awareness, and it definitely doesn't build trust. Historically, in my business, I work with parents and I have to teach them, that historically punishment has not worked out so well for everyone. Like we're still doing the things that we're doing at an abnormal rate nowadays. So what about connecting them with the support and resources and access to things that they would need to not have to vape or fall under peer pressure or whatever that may be. So what actually helps is honest conversations, not scare tactics, not lectures, just real information on what it is. Reducing stigma, because shame shuts people down and connection opens people up. Especially when someone's trying to get help for a mental health disorder and they're using vapes or cigarettes, but they're scared to go ask for help because they think they'll be shamed, or especially in a younger age too, and they might not even know where to ask for help or who to ask for help at that point in time. Support and connection, not punishment. I mentioned You know, young people do better when they feel understood and not controlled. And if we meet them where they're at and have a, you know, you're not going to get in trouble conversation, just what's going on, you know. I think, you know, we got to do the same thing we do as adults, is we have to listen. We have to listen to what they say, because they're the experts in what's going on in their lives. We are not. And then the last thing, and this one's huge, skills for stress in life, because if we take away the coping tool but don't replace it with anything, then we're left with a gap. So a lot of the work I'm involved in around mental wellness is really focused on this, helping people understand what's happening in their bodies and giving them simple, practical tools to come back to a place of balance. Because when people can regulate their emotions, their nervous system, they don't have to reach for something else like vapes or cigarettes or drugs, alcohol, things like that. So I'm just going to end with this. Young people are not the problem here, folks. They're just responding to the craziness of the world, the stress, the pressure, the environments, the expectations, the best way they know how. The peer pressure, throw that in there also. And so our role, like I said, is to meet them there, meet them where they're at, have these honest conversations, support them with information, with tools, and with connection. Because when that changes, their behavior will start to change too. So thanks.
Thank you so much, John. All right. And for real, last but not least, I'm going to now introduce Jenny Martin. Jenny is Regional Grants Administrator for Virginia's Southwest region with the Virginia Foundation for Healthy Youth, or VFHY, there we go, where she has worked for a number of years as an ardent supporter of prevention efforts. Jenny is also a community member and resident of Montgomery County, as well as a parent. So Jenny, we welcome you and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much. And I will say a special kudos to each of the members here on this panel today, because you've all brought such unique perspectives as well as good, solid data that represents this issue so very well. So it's an honor to be alongside of you today. So with that introduction, many of you, and you've already referenced us today, the Virginia Foundation for Healthy Youth has been around since 1999, and we've been funding tobacco use prevention, nicotine prevention work in communities across the Commonwealth since that time. And we're reaching about 40,000 to 50,000 young people a year with that evidence-based classroom curriculum. So a lot of that's happening in health and PE class, but a lot of times it's happening after school, or it's even happening in preschools where we're helping young people manage those social skills and emotional development. So across the board, we've got a big impact happening on our programs front, but we work to empower young people to make those healthy choices. While we're doing this work in nicotine prevention, we're also doing work in substance use prevention and childhood obesity. So we have two other initiatives, marketing efforts with youth empowerment known as Y Street, and that's training young people in particular how to advocate within their communities for good, effective policy systems and environmental change. We're also funding research with Virginia's largest universities, and we've to date funded around 40 large research projects. We have a youth tobacco prevention coalition amongst those universities in Virginia. A lot of good information coming out of that, including right now a vape characterization study that's going on in a toxicology lab at VCU, because we don't know what's in these devices. And you all alluded to that really, really well previously. So we are at certainly a new threshold, right, in this field. And what has changed within the last 10 years, let's say, of our work is profound, and it's impacting our young people and not in good ways. So it takes a village, just like the group that's been convened here today, to make an impact. And Erica, I loved your slides. I don't like getting an F on anything, but I will say that the failing grade Virginia gets is not necessarily related to the work that we're all doing and plugging into each and every day, but more about the scale at which we can do it, right? With funding limitations, with a political environment or other environments that don't make this work particularly easy in Virginia. So with that, I will say I have enjoyed working locally with Marty, with Montgomery County Public Schools, in looking at their alternatives to suspension. And that is one of the new resources that we're sharing. I'll drop this link in the chat, but we've created some tobacco use prevention and cessation resources that are a little bit newer, maybe more updated than things have been previously, as this field has evolved and changed. So with relation to alternatives to suspension, we've seen other areas across the state put into places some interventions that do a little bit more work in the restorative sort of justice area with young people and getting them to stay in their classrooms, not sending them out of school, for suspension, because we know that doesn't work. And we can't suspend our way out of the vaping crisis. So that has been a great opportunity to see firsthand what a school system has to go through in order to really put effective measures into place and help kids either break that nicotine addiction or find some good resources to help them move on beyond those products, hopefully getting out of high school without that addiction. Also, in addition to that, we have a funding opportunity coming out later this August. So for tobacco use prevention programming in particular, we'll release that in August, like I said, and that will be for a 3-year grant cycle to implement those evidence-based curricula. The My Healthy Futures is part of that. That is one example. But we have right now 18 different organizations across Southwest Virginia utilizing programs or even innovating some of their own. We've had a category of funding that's allowed organizations to create their own version of tobacco use prevention and cessation initiative. So we have an exciting one going on in Pulaski County right now, where kids are filming their own sort of public service announcements and videos and getting behind the scenes on a technical side and learning that piece, but also really understanding the content, understanding the information, and trying to role play a little bit and share those videos out with their peers. So some exciting things on the horizon, and I think all good things to come. Again, just really appreciate all of the work that each of your groups are doing and how you've come together around this issue so well here in Montgomery County. So the VFHY website is a good place to start too, if you're not familiar with us or would like to download. We have prevention lessons that are downloadable for grades K through 12. So a lot of different opportunities there to get some new information or equip and empower the groups that you partner with who might not have those particular resources at hand. So chat too. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you so much, Jenny. And I just want to thank everybody who has presented so far, all the panelists, for taking the time to share your insights and your expertise with us. It's very valuable. We'll now move into a time of question and answer, which, we'll have a little bit less time than we originally planned, but that's okay. I would say as we do this, we'll just try to focus more on what we can, on questions that relate to how we can specifically address the issue as it pertains to youth. Whereas I had some questions running around in my head about the effects of vaping long-term, which we maybe don't know a bunch of the science behind, but that's probably for maybe another time. So Mike, do you want to ask a question or two of the panel?
Yeah, so wow, just great information that's been shared by everyone this afternoon. And you know what? Those of you out there watching, you got to see this absolutely free. It didn't cost you a dime. So this is good stuff. I want to just get the group to weigh in on the myth that vaping is safer than using traditional cigarettes, because I think that's still a pretty widespread myth that a lot of people believe. So anybody that's got thoughts or facts to back that up and maybe dispel that myth, I think that would be helpful for our audience members.
Sure, I can address that briefly. The amount of pure nicotine that's in vapes, there's, per the slide, right? 30 packs of cigarettes in an ELF bar. It's rewiring the neural pathway to these kids. So you have the health effects, right, from inhaling things into your lungs as a youth. And you're right, we don't know the long-term effects yet, right? Vaping hasn't been out long enough. We don't have those long studies that we have on other forms of tobacco. But they're not safer because we don't know what's in them. It changes from vape to vape. You know, all kinds of things have been found in these vapes. I was speaking to the superintendent at Montgomery County the other day. They actually found fecal matter in a vape. So, you know, you really don't know what you're putting in your body. So safer is not a term that I would use when speaking of vaping.
And that lack of research data, long-term studies would also apply, I would assume, then to the effects of second and third hand exposure to vapes and what they put out when they're used. Let's just, since we don't have much time left, let's just talk about how the community itself can maybe rally around this issue a bit more. And if it is a concern for you as a community member, as a viewer, as a listener, you're maybe wondering, well, what can I do to help make things better? So any thoughts or suggestions about that for folks who are watching? Anyone?
I mean,
Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead, Jenny.
There was a reference to, you know, having those conversations with young people directly. And as a parent, I like the reference that's been made to, it's not necessarily one 60-minute conversation and you have to be an expert in it. It can be 61-minute conversations, you know? And so really just equipping yourself with enough information and to have those clear and consistent messages that parents disapprove of their kids using it goes so far in terms of preventing that behavior among young people.
John, you had a thought?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, having those honest conversations with, you know, with your kids or with, you know, students or whoever, you know, however it may be, however you're related to young adults, just having those conversations. And then, you know, like I was mentioning, when things happen, you know, supporting them, meeting them where they're at, what do they need? What's going on in their lives? How can we help them and support them in ways that they, you know, don't have to turn to this, or, you know, what can we do to support them in other ways to help them with coping skills or things like that, that could, you know, help with that. This is not, you've heard me say it a lot. I spend a lot of time talking about this is not an individual issue. Substance use isn't, vaping isn't, it's a community issue. And so if we're educating everyone in the community about these things, reducing the stigma and shame that surround these things, then, you know, we make it a better place for all of us and helps, you know, get this message across to, you know, kids and adults throughout the community. So
I have a thought if we have time.
Sure.
Okay, stop normalizing vaping. It's so normalized within our communities. You see parents vaping in front of little kids. You see older siblings vaping in front of their younger siblings. And what this does is it just normalizes it for them and makes them think, oh, okay, it's safe, it's easy, it's just something everybody does. That and all of our vape shops that we have, you know, I don't have the answer to what we can do for that, but people's school buses are, you know, dropping them off right in front of vape shops. So I don't have the answer to that, but those are things that could help.
I think you make some great points there, Erica. I hope that the slides that Erica shared of the local vape shops maybe pique some interest of some of you who maybe aren't so familiar with these retail spaces, and maybe to go in for yourself and look around and see what's on the shelves, what's out there for our young people. Because, you know, these flavors, these products, the way they're packaged, the way they're presented, they're not trying to capture a market that consists of myself, Dr. Redican, and some of the other panelists here. Let's just face it. These are very much geared toward young people, and our young people are the target market. There's no denying that. So I think the best thing that we can do as community members, as caregivers of young people, parents, guardians, whatever the case may be, is to educate ourselves, become more aware, not have our heads in the sand. This is an issue that any of our young people may struggle with at some point in their lives, because the access is certainly there. And as Erica, you so well stated, I think the normalization of this behavior and you know, the lack of perception of harm. People do think that it's a safer alternative and that it can't be that bad for you if everybody else is doing it. So I think those are the kind of things that we need to be more aware of for sure.
And also, let me just,
yeah, go ahead.
Mention real quick, it'd be good strategically, and this would be more of a nationwide thing, to really to deal with the influencers for the youth. You know, who are those influencers, and maybe having them, in fact, you know, make statements and so forth. You know,
I think that's a great thought. The influence of the money of big tobacco cannot be overlooked. I mean, that's what we're up against, and they have very deep pockets. So we definitely have a tall order in front of us when it comes to trying to compete with their messaging and their marketing efforts. We are about to run out of time. Just wanted to make it available for closing thoughts, and then Ross will let you wrap things up for us.
All right. Well, if we don't have any closing thoughts from panelists, then I will just say once again a huge thank you to all of you who participated in this panel today. I feel like we could have probably gone on for another hour at least, maybe two. I also want to thank anyone who joined the live stream today, and you know, hopefully you've gained some insight into how big of an issue this is right now, and some ideas as to how we can, if we haven't done anything to this point, how we can start addressing it. So let's continue this conversation in as many ways as we can think of. And I think a lot of those have already been mentioned, talking to young people being the big one. So another way we can do that, though, is to join your local prevention coalition, community prevention coalition. So if you're interested in doing that, let me just pop this slide up here so that you have it. But you can join this is a slide specific to the New River Valley. So you can join any of our local coalitions here, and you can see when they meet on this particular slide. But it's a great space for community members to come together and really share resources, and couldn't say enough good things about Prevention Coalition. So if you are interested in joining, please let somebody know. There's information on that sheet. But that really wraps it up for today. And again, thank you to everyone. Hope you have a wonderful day and get out there and continue this conversation. Thank you. All right, stream has ended.